Hey people, I'm going to start this out with a little rant about tariffs. I seen on Good Morning America that they were complaining about how tariffs are going to affect your wedding. But tariffs should affect you. It's a good thing. Why do you think Bill Gates is the largest farmland owner in America? They've been doing this for a while. They made it where the farmers can't profit so they could take all the land up. It's all about control. They want to control all America. The tariffs should affect you. What you see the prices going up too high, don't buy it. Buy American. It won't be long that we'll bring all the business back to America. We'll start growing our food in America again, and we won't have the stranglehold from the Illuminati. And you can't say that on YouTube. I seen they put a sticker on my movie just because I read the word Illuminati in the Latin Bible. But the tariffs are going to be a good thing. It'll be a short time. It put a squeeze on you. You might have to change some of your ways, which you probably should have anyway. You should have been buying Chinese food. So I see my first bloom coming out on my persimmon tree here and on my squash this morning. In March, I had planted all different kind of seeds all around the yard just to see what would come up where. See how my soil was. Instead of testing it, I let the seeds test it. And I seen I had too much acid in most of my soil. And so I spread some powdered lime all across where I was growing. And I seen a big difference just overnight. I spread it last night and watered it in. And I see everything is happy that I put some lime to it. And it dried out enough. I got my planters burning out again. Got them set on fire this morning. And it looks like they're going to turn out pretty good. Started to burn through at the end, so I had a little dirt over there to stop it. And the huckleberries are doing good. They're still real sweet. And I can't tell you the Latin name for these, but it really doesn't matter. I'm fixing to teach you something about Latin. YouTube recommends language videos to me all the time, and I watch some of them. And these guys, they seem like they're real intelligent, but no, they have a knack for memorizing and regurgitating what they're told. They lack the ability to think for themselves. But the Latin and modern Hebrew were created for the sole purpose to keep people from being able to read this. They had to recreate all the history to change everything because there was a lot of phrases carved in stone that they had to change the meaning elsewhere. They had to change the meaning on these phrases. And you hear of Vinny, Vicky, Viddy, and everybody thinks that Vinny means we came, and Viddy means we saw, and Vicky means we conquered. But it's not. You look at the word intervene, and you know it means to come in between. And you would think, that enter, being you speak English, you would think enter means come in. Enter, come in. And veen is between. And you see they're still trying to change the language. Veen is when they separate the waters between, between. All through Genesis 1 it used this word, veen. And they have changed it to among all through. Here it is, between, where they couldn't fit among in there. But this is veen, between. And so to intervene, enter, come in, veen, between, to come in between. And so everybody thinks that people who can speak Latin, read Latin, they think they're smart. But no, they're just a bunch of mush heads, and they can't think for themselves. But they're going to tell you, enter means between, and vino means to come. Vinny, we came. And Viddy, we saw, and Vicky, we conquered. And so that's not what that means. That's what they changed it to mean. But it had a different meaning when it was carved in the stone in the day. But they're definitely going to sit there and try to tell you enter means between, and vino, to come. And so the old Latin is like scientific Latin. Veen is between. And you see it on all your enes, on your benzene. The ene comes from this part, this double bond between the two carbons. But on the first day, of veen, V-I-N-E, veen, or between light, and veen husk, in between darkness. And it's here too, you don't see it, but the mem is a en. And that's what it's talking about in the story of Noah that we get to. But so this is a vinen, a veen in, between the waters. And the N is the waters. The N is the waters of Venen. And so what this mem means, mem is the name of that symbol of the N. And they didn't call it N. It's like you would call this a W, but it doesn't pronounce W, it pronounces wa. And why him of vittle, to fill between. And so this was designed this way from the beginning, is because these writings were secret writings for the priest. But the mem is the water. When you see a single M, it's pronounced as a M. 2 M's, it's pronounced as a me. And when you see 3 N's, it's pronounced as a mu. And when you see the word mem, it's letting you know that it means the Egyptian symbol for water, an en, in. And you see it in this word veen. I tell you, the OI here reads as an E, and you can see it here, it's veen. And so this is a VENI, veen, a venu. And so the French, they pronounce this voying, and watching, voying. But that comes from the great language change that doesn't come up until Genesis 11. And so I read the 7 lines before this yesterday, and I probably should have read this one more line, but this is where they try to fool you. They try to change this into a new paragraph, Noah's favor with God. But you see here, the first 4 lines ends with this P here, and then the next 4 lines and ends with this P here. And then this is starting the new. And you see it plain as day here in the Latin, that this went with this paragraph. You can see when I hit the Google Translate, and Noah found grace in the sight of the Lord. This goes with this other paragraph. And then these are the generations of Noah. So there was a lot of people in cahoots in trying to change the language. But it seems like it's talking about the veen, not the eyes, but the eye between. So I read this in that movie yesterday, and I watched it, and I noticed that I'm mistaken here. And I read this as if it had a tack of a mine is, because it just come up before like that. It has the tack here. And the Hebrew rules of the language, they'll say it, they'll let you know they don't know what that means. They'll give you a bunch of options, but none of them fit. Same as all the Hebrew punctuation. They don't know what any of the punctuation means. But like I say, it means, to the ones that know, to read this backwards, a mine is, M-I-E-N-E-S. And the mine is all him. And at, and it's double T, reading as I-V, Adavin. And the mine is all his, Adavin ben what. But here is just as arrive of, when came in, when he arrived. As arrive of ben he hailem, when he comes in, everybody all hail him the king. And ben he hailem all the tune ben what. The all tune ben what they're all singing. All tune ben what had 'em. Willed will them blood, the hema, a governum, the mighty men ruling over, the governum, assure from the old manseism. The old manseism. The old man, that might be something you would call the captain on the boat, the old man. Were you curb the rot had 'em, erotica, the great wickedness. The rot had 'em, barrets, and call rex ixer. The rex is the king, the czar is a king placed by a different nation. They come and take over, and they place a czar over you. And that's the same place, that the Catholic Church, they say that's where Christ comes from. It's spelt with an XR. Christmas was originally spelt with this XR. It's the czar. The Rex and czar. Either way you look at it, it means the ruler, the king, or the czar. And Alpha, Omega, from the beginning to the end, the Rexizar. And you see that word in the same class with Satan and the adversaries. Coming from czar, distressed, in trouble. Shall harass is czar. Pronounce czar, the T-Z-A-R, czar. It's where your word zari come from. The double R is a Y, zari. But it comes up 33 times here. A narrow, an adversary, distress, an enemy. And usually they'll give it an enemy in the Hebrew most of the time. A foe, enemy, adversary, distress, trouble, and cramped, There ain't enough space for a czar here. Was afflicted. But these are all the same definitions that they'll give Satan. And it's called a Rexizar, much is but a love work, a worker of call, a whore. The Rexizar is a whore, for sale. The love worker and call muy, much higham. When come you see is as eat meds, backwards because of this line here. The meds had 'em. Eat the meds had 'em. Bear it who toxin, the poison. Who's the toxin? A love taboo. And yammer you. And so yammer, this is where your word grammar comes from. And Homer is the old word for the commander of the ship, the command. Grammar is a system of rules and principles. And that rules comes from the ammer. And the gra, that's where the graph, all the writing comes from. The grapho, to write. The jur, to carve, to scratch. And so and yammer and Homer, is more of in rules, and not just talking but laying down the law. And rule you a ham he at. And rule you ham he at. And so the ham he at, that's the land of Africa. That was Egypt. All that was the land of Ham. This was all Ham's land. He divided between his 4 sons, Canaan, Cush, Phut, and Mizraim. And so it's talking about the czar over here where he has no business in Ham. And why rule you a Ham he at? The meds, M-D-E-S, the A-E reading is the E-S. And, being the tack here, the meds had them as right, as the writer brate as in created and shaped, and braid 'em all upon had me, made mad, and backwards, and them, and have 'em, had, or D or T, had, or at, and at some rums would few of pheasants, F-E-S-E-N-C, a few of pheasants in enmity, enmity, a deep-seated, often mutual hatred. And so the birds of the air, you'll see in the New Testament when he's talking about the birds, it means the priests. And the few of pheasants see enmity, a mutual hatred, to see a sight 'em, and hate 'em when you see 'em. And then this should read with that. And it's when commits on a veen you. When commits on, when you come between. When commits on veen you. So it's all written in code because you weren't supposed to talk about the Rexizar taking over the land of Ham. Why, Homer, you ham he at meds had 'em. As writer, bear a time all upon had me. And it was against the law to say that the old Rexizar was a big old whore for sale. So you had to kind of code it into the much is but love worker, a but love worker of call, a prostitute. The Rexizar is for sale. And so, they got our history line messed up, but they were invaded. The Romes, the Romes, the creepy things that aren't stationary, they're moving around. The Romes invaded a long time ago for the daughters of the earth. Not the daughters of men, but the daughters of the earth. They had me of in what? They were wanting the farmland. They didn't care about all this foot and cush over here. They wanted this Nile Valley. They would take over, they would put a czar in place, and they would rig the tariffs to put all the farmers out of work. And then they would buy up all the land cheap. And if you look over here in the Nile Valley, this entire Nile Valley, it's nothing. It's all lotted up for farmlands. This feeds the whole world. A little city here to put the migrant workers in. When the floods come, they would have to get out. And that's when they would all come on the day of Mu. They would all come out of the valley here. The whole thing, it's all farmland. They would all come out of the valley and they would come up on the hill over here in Egypt, the Copt. They would tax the shit out of them, making sure they didn't have any more money. So when it come time to plant the next year, they would have to borrow money to go plant the Nile Valley again. And it's the same thing going on in America. Same people running things. The Copts. The Inuit Coptes. The new order of Cyclorum, a seed selection. And so the Nephilim is not the Nephilim, but it's Nephilim. And they were the mighty men, the Goverum, to rule over. And the Nephilim, Nephilim, Huberts, the Huberts. The bright-minded, the shining intellect, the wise ones. They weren't giant people. There was no giants. They had giant minds. Nephilim, the giant minds, the Huberts. And they'll tell you the Nephilim refers to a group of mysterious beings or humans, often depicted as giants or powerful figures. Powerful figures. Giants of industry. A bad interpretation is the fallen ones. But that's what it means, Nephilim, and where they fell in of the Huberts, the giant minds. And back in the day, you might find it somewhere hidden in the bottom of here. Some of the rabbis weren't sure if it meant a giant mind, great intellect, or giant stature. They didn't know. But it seems like they kind of moved that definition out They're trying to get people silly again. But I know this is talking about the flood. When commits on a venue, and it's just time to intervene. So I imagine they put all the giants, the Nephilim, the Romans, they stuck them in the valley on the New Year, on the day of Mu, when it flooded. On the day of New, or Mu. I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.